kings and queens, welcome back to another episode of Faith Helps Podcast, where we bridge the gap between psychology and faith, all in the effort to help you feel encouraged, inspire you, help you heal, and challenge you to be your best self. And I'm your host, Dr. Diamond Alexis Booth, and I'm so glad that you are here. Y'all like my little elevator speech? I'm working on it. Anyway, welcome back, guys. I had this epiphany this morning as I was thinking about like what I wanted to bring to you all today for today's episode and just praying about it and whatnot. And I was like, oh snap, how am I coming up on a year of doing this? And I am. And I'm like very proud of myself. So tap myself on my own shoulder. Anyway, it's just like cool to take moments to step back and just reflect. And that's something I've been doing a lot of lately. If you guys follow me on any of my socials, you know that a lot has been going on and you've gotten the full download and you should be up to speed. If not, head over to my Instagram. It's at Dr. DrDymond Booth, Dr. Diamond Booth, and it's the same for my TikTok, any other social media I have. But yeah, I've just been doing a lot of reflection, self-reflection. This has been such a huge year of transition and growth for me. And so one of the things that came to mind as I was thinking about like, oh snap, this is coming up on a year of doing this podcast and being consistent for the most part. I could have been more consistent, but I was pretty darn consistent. And I definitely did my best and will be doing even more of my best moving into the new year. But one of the things I realized is the growth that has happened. When I first started off these episodes, when I first launched this podcast, there's so much timidity, there's so much insecurity, yet doing it on faith, doing it with boldness and just jumping in and giving it my best shot and believing in what passion was like burning within me. And so I looked back on some of my old videos and I see when I first started, I was fumbling over my words, and then I switched over to I don't want to be on camera. I hated being on camera. And so I would just write out my scripts because I was so afraid of forgetting things. And what if I don't say this? What if I forget to make that point? Or these different ideas. Sometimes it can be so overwhelming, the amount of ideas that flood my mind or the amount of just things that come to mind. And I'm like, whoa. And I get so caught up and worried about forgetting to say the thing or to bring it up. And then when I cut the camera off, I'm like, dang, I wanted to segue to that and give that example or share that testimony. And I forget. And then eventually I broke out of that shell and said, you know what? If it's important enough, it'll come back up. And sometimes I still will have little notes here and there. And then also sometimes I have learned to give myself more opportunity to take a breath and slow down and think about what it is that I want to say. And then reviewing some of the things that I reflect on and write down before an episode and praying that God just brings back to my remembrance all that I thought about, all that I reflected, all that He revealed to me or exposed to me, the things that I've learned. Because to be quite honest, yes, I am a doctor now. It still hasn't settled in. I think it won't settle in officially until I have the physical paper in my hand. I don't think it will settle in until I walk across the stage. I think that's when it'll register. But having to wait 6 freaking months to walk across the stage to feel like it's actually real, as if the 8 years of pain and suffering, actually more than that if I count undergrad. But nevertheless, I digress. I'm getting distracted. See, this is why I used to write my episodes out before just getting on camera. But yeah, I was just reflecting on all those things and just seeing how I've changed, how I've grown. And I also started thinking about some of the changes I'm going through now as a clinician and some things that have kind of been brought to my attention in a not so happy way, so to speak. So, for example, once I officially finished my internship, one of the things that was no longer being put in place is I no longer had to be recorded for my sessions. Anyone knows that when you are being recorded, you are performing your best. You're making sure you're dotting your I's and crossing your T's, and you're performing. And it can be really hard, and I really would like to challenge institutions on how they go about this, but I also recognize the need for it because some people just be doing anything. But I realized that I held so much of me back from the room with my clients. And sometimes, not all the times, but I feel like the full breadth of my authenticity there was still some restrictions there. There was still a chain on that because of this idea and the fact that I was being recorded and that I was under supervision. And so I had to make sure I said things a certain way, or I used this intervention or that intervention because I'm being graded or assessed on those things. And it kind of creates a very rigid environment. And yes, you can test the waters with just doing what feels right in that moment. And sometimes I did. And then there were other times where I wish I had just said the thing to the client instead of all this fluffiness. I think in my natural form as a clinician, I'm a lot more direct. I don't find it helpful to sit with an answer to something and leave your client to just groundhog dig for it all day if you're seeing that they're not going to get to it. Now, depending on the circumstance, they may need that because you also don't want them to become so dependent and reliant on you that they don't learn how to do this self-reflection and introspection on them for themselves, right? And at the same time, there needs to be a balance. And as I say balance, I'm also thinking about what balance means for me. And the moment that I no longer had to be recorded for sessions and I was allowed to be truly free in how I conduct therapy, and it's now working towards me having this framework of it's my license on the line, I started thinking about what do I actually believe when it comes to therapy. And as you guys know, I heavily believe in integrating faith when it comes to therapy. I also heavily believe in a lot of holistic methodologies for healing the mind and the heart. And a lot of my belief system is now starting to rip through the barricade and say, oh, we're free now, to actually help people in a way that I believe is actually going to help them. For example, because I realize I'm kind of talking very vaguely. While I find coping skills helpful, and they can be helpful for some people and for a period of time, I do not necessarily agree with the idea that you should have coping skills your whole life, because that's saying that you are going to function with dysfunction for your whole life. And I believe that we can get to a point where we're not just putting a band-aid on the dysfunction, but we're actually resolving the dysfunction and we're actually addressing it. And I think what goes along with that is sometimes we put coping skills on something that actually just needs exercise. I was working with a client who was really, really struggling with anger, rage. And there was a lot of grief that was under that, of course. However, he had been through years of DBT and all these different things and all these different resources, and had learned all these coping skills. And no one suggested just exercise and changing your diet. Like, people don't even know stuff like that. And Western psychology, Westernized medicine doesn't teach that. It doesn't teach like the practical things we could be doing to drastically improve your mental health, your spiritual health, and your physical health. And they all are integrated together. They're not exclusive of one another. They're integrated. And the moment we started integrating, okay, let's get this workout routine, and we sat together and we created a workout plan and created an exercise regimen, and paired him up with a nutritionist to talk with him about his diet. He was downing caffeine. Caffeine is not good if you're already someone who's high energy, ready to go 0 to 100, and also experiencing anxiety and all those things. And that was something that had never been brought to his attention prior to then. And I started thinking about like how often we do a disservice to people when we teach them band-aids instead of solutions, and we're teaching them ways to stifle the pain instead of uncovering the pain and dealing with it head on, with the support. I believe that a lot of times in therapy, people come into therapy thinking that the clinician is there to fix them, and that's not the case. The clinician is not here. We're not here to fix you. And actually, if you would ever do therapy with me, the first thing I tell you if you say something like that to me is that I am not here to fix you, and there is nothing to be fixed with you. You're not something to be fixed. You're something to be nurtured. There may be some things that you're dealing with and you're coming to therapy with that need some healing and some hand-holding and some comfort and support, but not fix. Because the moment we start getting into our mind on, oh, there's something wrong with me, or oh, there's a problem, or I'm broken, and trust me, I've been there, because I've had those moments where I was literally bloody eyed, teary, crying and grieving on how broken I felt. And God had to reveal to me, because for me, my mental health and spiritual health looks like also seeking God, not just therapy, but both. And I would love to be in an environment where I can start teaching that more, which is partially why I started this podcast, is because I've had to be in so many environments where I had to choose one or the other. And I don't believe that there's a choice between faith and psychology. I believe that they hold each other's hand in essence. I believe that they complement each other. If you haven't read the book by Dr. Anita Phillips, The Garden Within, please go read it. It will be such a blessing to you. And I think every single clinician should go read it. Whether you believe in God or not, I believe you should go read it and just have an open mind. Just like everyone encourages Christians to have an open mind, please have an open mind as well, regardless of your faith background, because that book has blessed so many of my clients, regardless of their faith, regardless of their race, their beliefs, and regardless of how much therapy experience they've had. And so my hope is that as I am preparing to step into this new year, that I continue to explore for myself, like especially as I'm preparing to take the EPPP and be not just Dr. Diamond Alexis Booth, but a licensed Dr. Diamond Alexis Booth. I am looking forward to creating a space for me to be a clinician for the type of clients who are seeking that bridge between psychology and faith and are open to an approach in therapy that is not necessarily strictly Western, based off of Westernized medicine and philosophy. Yes, there may be times in my journey and in my work as a clinician I may pull from different theories, but ultimately and truly, I'm still finding myself wrestling with, like, I want to help for real. I want to help for real. And because I'm so passionate about not wasting time, I don't want to waste anyone else's. I don't want anyone wasting mine, and I don't want to waste anyone else's. And I think one of the worst things you could do is to allow someone to come to you for help and you're not actually helping. And that is, for me, where I draw the line as a clinician of when I am no longer helping you and this relationship is no longer helpful to you. Why are we wasting your time? And so I know for myself that as a clinician, and this is something I'm still like exploring and developing, like you are seeing real time revelation of me just starting to kind of reflect on like, what does being a clinician mean for me now that the guardrails are down and the spotlight isn't on, and I can actually function in a way that I think is going to be helpful to my clients. And in addition to being helpful to my clients, what would it look like for me to truly step into the role of being this type of therapist that I visualize? And often I think one thing but say a different thing, and not restricting myself from that anymore. And I don't even know if that makes sense. But the reason I bring this topic up today is because as I was looking back on some of my old episodes, I was reviewing one of the episodes where I talked a little bit about like transitions and reintroducing yourself. And I was like, oh dang, look at that here. Here we are at the end of a year, at the start, in the crust of beginning a new year. It's the end of my first year doing a podcast consistently, and beginning a second year and doing it consistently. And it's the end of my year as a student. Whew, that is so relieving to be able to say. And it's the beginning of my career as a clinician and as a therapist, a licensed therapist, like stepping into that, going into 2025. It's just, there's so much symbolism there as you like think about those things. And I kind of lost my train of thought, so forgive me. But basically, like, we're at the end and the beginning, like right there at that sweet spot. And I am not someone who believes in or practices like New Year resolutions. You start when you get the revelation. How about that? Like when you make the goal, start then. So that's my like approach to it. I don't believe in like waiting until just start, because then you're never going to start. So I'm just thinking about all those things, and I realized that as I was looking back on that episode, I was talking about the difficulty of like reintroducing yourself, and I'm having new revelation now, like hindsight, of the fact that it's so hard to reintroduce yourself when the circumstance and situation and environment is going to remain the same. So like, I'm changing. There's a change that's happening within me. There's a change that's happening within how I'm functioning. But the environment that I'm in is remaining the same. The clients I've been working with, they're remaining the same. So I'm thinking also about what it's going to look like for them to see this shift starting to happen a little bit in therapy. And some of them have already started to see that and have actually been responding well. So I'm like, I'm doing something right. But what's it like for me to have confidence in who I feel I truly am as a clinician around people and environments that may not agree with it and who may not get it? And as I think about like having to go to conferences and all these other different things, when I present myself as a clinician I know myself to be, that merges this faith and psychology unapologetically, and believes in not just prescribing a coping skill, but believes in prescribing actual application for lifelong change, for lifestyle change. How do I stand boldly in that version of myself, even when the environment around me is still like, oh, you acting brand new, like, well, what is this, like, or disagrees? Like, how do you stand in the face of adversity and still step boldly into your true self and your true authenticity? And as I reflect on that, a couple of things come to mind, and I just wanted to share a few with you guys. So I actually wrote down some steps for myself as I was thinking about what this is going to look like for me. Like, how do we truly step into our authentic selves and embrace and embody our authentic versions of ourselves, even when we're going to still be in the same environment or in an old environment that knew us as one way? And I realized that for me, you guys hear this all the time, write it down. Habakkuk 2:2, write it down. Write down that version of yourself. I had to write down for myself, like, what do I actually believe creates change in therapy? What do I actually believe is helpful? What do I actually, like, how do I actually want to show up? Like, I wrote the answers to those questions down. Like, what does it mean for me to be unapologetically authentic? Not disrespectful, but unapologetically authentic. What does it mean for me to be authentic in every like area of my life? But particularly for me, my focus was in this therapy space as a clinician, how I show up when I am educating other people or when I'm going out to speaking engagements. Am I speaking what I was taught, or am I speaking what I believe? And that writing it down was so freeing for me. And it felt so good to be able to do that. So number one, write it down. Number two, write down your why. Be intentional about it. Like, why are you doing this? This is not just something you're doing because it just so happens to be the end of a year or start of a new year, but this is something that you actually believe in. My why is because I realize I can't go another day teaching something that I don't truly believe, or functioning in a way that feels so restrictive, or biting my tongue when I have something that I believe the Holy Spirit is leading me to say to someone, just for the fact that it's not supported by empirical evidence. And so those were my whys. I didn't want to continue. One of the whys I wrote down was I didn't want to continue dishonoring God and not being ashamed, but silencing Him in an environment and in a space that He gifted me to be in. There is no way I should be where I am right now. There's no way that I should have made it this far. Like, if you knew my journey, like, to get to this point, oh my gosh, there's no way I should be here. And so I'm just grateful for that. And I realized, like, God, you set me up to be in people's life for a reason. And I don't want to mismanage or mishandle or mistreat anyone. And I want to use this space the way you want me to use it, because you're the one who gifted me to be in this space. And it's not something to take lightly, because these are people's lives. These are your children's lives. And so that was short, but not short. Longer reason longer. My why of stepping into this intentionality about being my authentic self as a clinician. Number 3, I wrote down, be graceful and have patience. Because when you are going into the same environment with a new perspective and a new approach, there may be reactions, and not everyone may get it. Some people may not understand it. And so don't get angry and temperamental about it. Don't jump to the conclusion of, oh, they want me to say the same. Have grace about it. Be patient. Recognize that they knew a version of you for X amount of years. Don't expect someone to just up and say, oh, okay, you all right. Like, give people grace and give yourself grace. I know it's even with myself wrestling between sometimes having to pause and realize, like, okay, am I about to say something that was ingrained into my teaching as a psychology student, or am I saying something that actually feels in alignment with what I believe is actually going to give breakthrough for this person right now, or help them or support them in the way that they're needing it right now, right? And then trusting my gut. Am I trusting my gut, or am I relying on empirical evidence or data and stuff like that? Am I trusting my gut, and I'm not trusting what God is leading me to say? I pray so often when I'm in sessions, like majority of the time, especially when I have clients who are going, I'm praying about, like, what is all this talking about? Like, what is the root, and what do I need to pull them back to, Lord? And that is something they can't teach you in any doctoral program. I'm just saying. So have grace for yourself and for others. The next thing I wrote down, number 4, is to communicate but not explain. What I mean with that is, I realize for myself, I have to have confidence in what I believe. I have to be able to confidently give the rationale for my treatment recommendations, and be confident in knowing why it's going to work, why I'm believing it'll work, and being able to support that. Not having to explain myself of, oh, like, I'm doing this, oh, I'm sorry because of this. And don't do that. Have confidence in how you're showing up, and say it boldly, and think of it from the perspective of educating others, because some people don't know. I remember the first time I mentioned the book that I recommended to you guys, The Garden Within by Dr. Anita Phillips. The first time I referenced it to a colleague, they didn't know what it was, but the concept that I was drawing from in that conversation resonated with them. And so it wasn't that I was explaining myself, but I was educating them on my process and my intervention for that particular situation we were discussing. So I think that as you're learning how to step boldly into your authentic version of yourself, it's also being confident in, this is what I believe, and this is why I believe it. You have to know it yourself. And you have to actually believe what you're saying. If you don't believe what you're saying, why would anyone else believe it? And it's going to come across. It's going to show if you don't actually believe it. So communicate, not explain. Number 5, be consistent. I preach this all the time. Be consistent. Consistency is key, because if you are flopping back and forth, it's confusing, it's disruptive, and it's not going to get you the results that you're saying that you want, or that you're trying, that you're aiming towards. So you have to be consistent in how you are wanting to show up. And number 6, I would say, is managing expectations. So this kind of goes hand in hand with when you're reintroducing yourself, having grace for other people. I was thinking back on when Jesus went back to his hometown, and everyone knew him as the carpenter's son, and they pigeon-toed him. I think that's the phrase. They put him in this box of being the carpenter's son, and it goes on to say that he wasn't able to do that many miracles because they kept thinking about who they knew him as before, and they were not able to receive this new version of him that had stepped into their presence at this current time. And I think it's the same for ourselves, as we're constantly evolving and growing and learning and improving. There are going to be those times, especially with this example that we've been running with for this conversation, where you are going to have to show up in environments and you may want people to respond in one way and they may not. And it's gonna be disappointing. It may be sad. They may not get it. They may not support it. That is okay. Manage your expectations of other people, and then be willing to do just as Jesus did, was walk away from that and not to take it on as your responsibility. My mom always says you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. In essence, you can present to people a truth. You can present to people knowledge. You can present yourself, to your authentic self, to people. They have the right to decide whether or not they want to accept it, receive it, or reject it. Okay? And not just leaving it there, following up with number 7, which is focus on the ones who are supporting you. I feel like in culture, especially in media, we focus so much on the haters and the people that's not with you and the people that's they jealous and all this other stuff. What about the people that are rocking with you? Like, shout them out. Focus on them. Focus on the people who are in your corner and cheering you on and saying, nah, boo, you got this. Don't even sweat it. Oh, okay, boo, I like this. I love this for you. One of my friends is always saying that. I love this for you. And I love when she says that. And so focus on your supporters. Focus on the ones who are supporting you. Don't get hung up on the ones who are rejecting you, or in other words, redirecting you, or focusing on the people who are skeptical and questioning it and putting you in a position where you feel like you have to explain yourself. Those aren't your people, boo. Focus on the ones who are in your corner and rocking with you. And be open for, if you don't have that community, be open for God to bring them into your life. But you also have to go outside. Like, you have to, go do things. You can't God's not going to drop your community on your doorstep, babe. You're going to have to go out. Okay? All right? Okay. And then lastly, which is going to be for me an ongoing thing, and I'll probably reference it in future episodes as I'm continuing to evolve and grow and come out of my cocoon and spread my little wings, my little doctor wings, is continue to reflect and assess. Because the more you spend time in silence, the more you spend time actually reflecting and meditating and listening for God's voice and His leading, and listening and searching your own heart, you're able to have so much insight, and you're able to function in so much more intentionality and effectiveness and wisdom. So spend time reflecting and slowing things down and canceling out the noise. Our world is so noisy. Our phones are so noisy. Like, there's so much things to constantly hear and listen to. Sometimes, every day, my challenge for you going into this year is every day, at least 5 minutes of just sitting with yourself and thinking in silence, not listening to podcasts, not only listen to me, don't use me as an excuse, just silence all the distractions, all the people, by yourself, not with a friend, because y'all gonna get to yapping and then y'all not doing what y'all supposed to be doing. By yourself, sitting and being intentional about reflecting, maybe even drawing on some reflection questions, so that you're actually cultivating a space for deeper thought and introspection. I'm actually planning to launch a book later on in the new year. Actually, probably the following year. I want to create a journal. You guys know I'm always working on a book because I'm gifts. Anyway, but I'm working on a journal book that will help facilitate deeper thinking and meditation and self-reflection. However, in the meantime, there are other journals you can get. You can Google, Amazon, Target, whatever, journal prompt books. Matter of fact, you don't even have to buy one. You can go online and type in journal prompts and questions for deeper self-reflection and or introspection, whatever, or journal prompts, and a ton will come up. Pick one that catches your eye or resonates with you or hits a nerve, and sit with it and thinking about what emotions you're noticing coming up in your body. Where are you feeling tension? What about that question drew you to it? And then taking it even a bit further, as you are writing out or thinking out those things that are coming up, exploring the meaning of those things. Because sometimes we say, oh, I want to grow more. What does it mean to grow? And what does it mean for you to grow? What would it look like for you to grow? And what would it look like for you to grow in X amount of time, or this amount of time, or this environment, or with this? Like, go deeper. Don't just surface level answer these questions, but 5 minutes every day throughout 2025. 5 minutes. That's it. You can pull your time from the time you would spend on social media doing foolishness. Okay? That is what I have for you guys today. And I hope that you guys have a beautiful and lovely weekend. I love you guys. And if nothing else, remember, faith helps. Peace out.